This panel will be moderated by Manuel Patrick Alonso Ulrich, who is Regional Coordinator for South America of the Sparkassen Stiftung, German. Sorry that I mispronounced, but Sparkassen Stiftung is one of the sponsors, partners of this event, and we feel very grateful for that. He's German. He has 20 years working in over 14 countries. And it's worth mentioning that he has a master's degree in business administration. He specialized in finance and accounting from Goethe University in Frankfurt and Mann in Germany. He's also a certified trainer from the International Training Center of United Nations in Turin, Italy. He has worked on topics related to microfinance and developing finance systems, carrying out short-term missions in many countries of Eastern Europe and in Latin America, and long-term stays in Ecuador, Peru, and China. He has been manager of many microfinance initiatives, and he's also been a consultant in that area. Since January 2019, he's regional coordinator for South America. He's been collaborating for 10 years as project leader in many countries and continents. He continues to promote financial inclusion in South America. He has had a lot of experience and he has visited many countries like Germany, England, Bulgaria, Ecuador, Argentina, Honduras, Azerbaijan, Cuba, Mexico, Chile, and soon he will visit Colombia as well. So without further ado, I will leave you with Manuel Alonso Ulrich to begin the panel of solidarity finance mechanisms from the perspective of local governments. Thank you. Thank you to all the organizing team, everyone who made this wonderful event possible. Thank you also for trusting me to moderate this session. Dear panelists, members of the audience, good morning, afternoon, evening, all over the world. It's a pleasure to be with you in this session. First, I'd like to start with some technical reminders for the session. The first reminder is that we are live streaming on the website gcef2021.org. We also have simultaneous interpretation available for the session, English, Spanish, and French, so you can select the language of your choice. And I'd like to invite you to use the hashtag GCEF2021, the most important social and solidarity economy event in the world. So please comment on our social media. Zoom is where you'll find some panelists, and any questions or comments that you have either for specific panelists or the whole panel, let us know. You can also write your questions and comments in the website, and United's social media accounts will be monitoring them so that the questions reach the panelists. To give us the opening remarks for this panel, it's my pleasure to introduce José Manuel Cruz Contreras. I want to very briefly introduce him. José Manuel Cruz Contreras is from Valle de Santiago in Guanajuato. He has over 25 years of experience in the cooperative movement. He's president of the Confederation of Savings and Loans in Mexico, CONCAMEX, and he has also been general manager of Caja Popular Manuel. José Manuel, over to you for your opening remarks to give us context for this conversation. Thank you. Thank you very much, Manuel. It's a pleasure to greet you. You were telling me that you're in Germany right now, but I see you wearing something similar to a guayabera shirt, a traditional Mexican shirt. So that's quite nice. It's an honor to greet you and also all of our participants joining us from all over the world, different time zones. Welcome to GCEF 2021. Greetings to the organizing committee as well and the big thank you for the opportunity to be here on behalf of the Confederation of Savings and Loans Cooperatives. I am a chair of that organization, so thank you for the distinction. CONCAMEX is made up of around 155 cooperatives, all of them regulated by the National Banking and Securities Commission. And the organization that I represent, the Confederation, groups together over 100 of these regulated entities legally authorized in the country. Part of what we are doing today is promoting sustainable finance. I believe that the cooperative sector has been working with the International Cooperative Partnership in the Green Cooperative Pact, which seeks to take better care of the environment by including people that can help us in terms of nature conservation. The topic that we're here to address is a very important one: solidarity finance mechanisms from the perspective of local governments. I was talking about this with my fellow panelists earlier, that the inclusion of many roles and stakeholders that will be participating in the panel will be very interesting, because they'll be sharing different experiences of local governments, which, as we know, are very diverse around the world, how they are attempting to include the most vulnerable, the people who need finance the most, the people who need mechanisms for their savings. And I think cooperatives are an ideal mechanism for people to get involved. But of course, it is not the only one. There are many mechanisms that have the same goal, which is inclusion. The most important thing is that we all join efforts. We're not alone. That's very important to say. In Mexico, more than 8 million people belong to a cooperative, but there are millions more that have different associations and that have the same goal. So that's why the government needs to promote public policies that lead to more inclusion and equality. Thank you, Manuel. I don't want to take more of the time. I think it's worth it to leave more time to listen to our experts in the panel, and I'll be joining you at the end for some final remarks. Thank you and congratulations. Thank you, Jose Manuel. You've brought up very important points, I think, and that will definitely help us to spark the conversation. I am sure they will be analyzed more in depth throughout this session as we share experiences and roadmaps that the panelists will be presenting. So now I'd like to introduce all the panelists that make up this discussion. It is with great pleasure that I introduce first Jordi Ibáñez Pulido, director of FEBEA. He studied in the University of Barcelona and specialized in nonprofit organizations. He is a professor of ethical finance in many universities in Spain. He worked for head of development and ethical banks. He was also head of the marketing and communication department of Caritas in Barcelona. He was also coordinator of microcredits in Wunsolmond from Caixa Catalunya. I also have the pleasure of introducing Ana Bella Cristina Zamora Albornoz. She studied social communication. She has a master's degree on communication planning process. She's originally from Chile, but lives in Argentina. She has lived there for 18 years, and her experience combines planning and applying communication strategies in civil society organizations, more specifically for agriculture and social and solidarity economy, through projects and initiatives that promote outreach with the communities. And she's been a professor in the National General Sarmiento University. In the last year, she has been a part of several technical teams in the Instituto Nacional de Asociativismo and INAES as part of the Productive Development Ministry of Argentina. Welcome, Ana Bella. We also have with us Milder Villegas. Milder Villegas is originally from Peru, but is here representing Quebec. He has over 25 years of experience in the finance sector, both traditional finance and solidarity finance. His career has taken him to several administrative bodies and organizations that seek social and economic development. Since 2011, he has been general director of Filaction, an impact investment organization that supports SMEs in Quebec, more specifically in social economy, tourism, and business diversity. Welcome, Milder. We also have here with us Juanita Virginia Salinas Vázquez, an economist from the University of Cuenca, Ecuador. She's a professor of the University of Azuay in Ecuador. She specializes in gender and development. She does impact assessment. She's something she studied in the University of Malaga, Spain. She has an MBA from the University of Loja, and she also specialized in local development projects, and she is a PhD student in the Polytechnic University. She has worked with many universities in gender perspective in Azuay, Ecuador, and for 11 years she has worked as professor of the Polytechnic Salesiana University of Ecuador. Her research field in the last 10 years has been solidarity finance, local development, cooperativism, and family and solidarity economy. Welcome, Juanita. Last but not least, we also have Luis Ato from Caja Municipal de Ahorro y Crédito de Suliana. Luis is an agronomist. He specializes in microfinance, specifically credit products and loans. He currently holds the position of business unit manager at a distance, so he develops communication channels, remote communication channels for clients of Caja Municipal de Ahorro y Crédito de Sullana. It's an honor and a pleasure to be meeting some of you. We met in person before the pandemic, and it's great to see you again in this virtual panel. I am excited for the discussion, and I'm excited to listen to your experiences, initiatives, everything you're here to share. So the last thing to explain to you is how we will run this session. We will have 2 discussion rounds to exchange experiences. We will get a chance to hear from all of our panelists. In every round, I'll be asking a guiding question for the group. And then each of you individually will have 4 minutes in the first round and 3 minutes in the second round to share your thoughts and ideas to answer the question, considering the context that Jose Manuel gave us. We will show you a slide when you have 1 minute left so that you try to stick to the time. And I will very briefly try to share some ideas at the very end. Next, we will have about 15 minutes for a Q&A, questions from the audience that could be addressed to individual panelists or to the whole panel. Don't forget to send your questions through our social media channels. And I think now we're ready for the first round of questions. So we will begin to exchange experiences by answering the first question. We'd like to hear from each of you some details about how the initiative that you represent contributes to creating solidarity finance mechanisms. Do consider that most people are not familiar with your initiative or the company, business, organization that you're here representing. So very briefly share what it does, the value that it adds, the maybe what makes it different from other initiatives, and above all, how it contributes to creating solidarity finance mechanisms, which are so necessary in many corners of the world. For representatives of financial organizations, maybe share with the audience what makes your organization different from others, why your organization promotes solidarity finance. And now I'm ready to turn it over to Jordi Ibanez. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. I was in GCEF Bilbao a few years ago and I loved the experience. So it really is a pleasure to be back. I feel very sorry not to be there in person. And I must say that the forum in Bilbao was very interesting. But now that I see the room and the beautiful dresses that Paola is wearing, I think this forum will be very special because of the joy that it's transmitting. I think doing things with very lighthearted and with a lot of joy. Thank you. So the Ethical Finance Foundation, Fundación Finanzas Éticas, that I'm here representing, are part of the Ethical Bank Network, Red Banca Ética. We are a citizens movement, a cooperative, however you want to see it, with presence in Spain and Italy. The group is made up of different instruments. The main instrument is the bank itself. It's a cooperative bank, as I already explained. It is legally authorized to operate as a bank, which means that we receive deposits and we make loans and so on. It's a non-profit bank, which means that we don't do profit sharing. And it's a bank where participation is of utmost importance. The bank groups 50,000 people. It's not small in both countries, of course. And it's a popular bank. It's a community bank where there is no institutional partner that has more than 1% of the capital. So it's a bank that really promotes working horizontally and as a network and to seek collaboration. Besides the banking services itself, the project also has promoted a series of initiatives. I think that's something that makes Banca Etica different. We have two foundations, one in Italy and one in Spain. We also have a microfinance entity, Credisut, which makes funds available to develop cooperatives in other countries. And we also do an ethical assets management fund. It's called Ética Social. In Spain, we have a series of organizations in ethical finance that work together with the foundation and the associations. So the question is, how can we contribute to solidarity finance? Well, I guess to sum it up in the short time that we have, I'd say that we work in three different ways. We do solidarity finance because we also promote cultural activities. We know that having a financial instrument is important, but we also know that most of the world, unfortunately, exists in other areas and we need to make an influence. So we try to promote a cultural change as well. I would say, do very hard work in that area. We do solidarity finance through banking services. Bear in mind that in our last balance after 20 years of since our foundation, we realized that about 50% of the credit we have given had been rejected by traditional banking before. And I think this really shows you a lot of the work that we do. And yet, we do our assessments very well because we don't have default payment. So I think we have good clients. And the third thing we do is what we call para banking services. As I was trying to explain, we've received many applications, different projects, and of course, we cannot say yes to all of them as a bank because when we have to guarantee the rights of our investors, we can't always give credits unless we know that the payback is guaranteed. But at the same time, there are other projects that we believe are valuable within solidarity economy. So we have also created other financial instruments. For instance, we offer collaterals, we offer impact finance, so social equity and projects that need to happen. Sometimes they need support other than finance. And because we have a lot of experience and we've been doing a lot of work in the financial sector, we can help those projects come to life. And this is the last thing I will say. I think we work through cooperation. Social economy is all about cooperation, and we work with public administrations locally because we are public interest entities, I think, and that is what makes us come close to the public administration. We try to partner with them, and often we have projects in any of those three areas that I described that we worked in. So that's how I would introduce the work that we do, and I want to give the opportunity to the rest of the panelists to intervene as well. So thank you. Thank you, Jordi. And I want to go directly to Ana Bella Zamora so that she shares a little bit about her initiatives. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share what we do with community banks. Solidarity Finance in Argentina, we belong to the global south and we have had cyclic crises, economic crises, and that has led to impoverishing people who have already suffered, especially in the Buenos Aires city urban area where a third of our population lives. The community banks that I want to talk to you about have been very important to me as a worker in many institutions that implement microcredit. But at the same time, because as a researcher, I've been looking into participatory activities as part of my master's studies. So I want to share a little bit about the regulatory framework in Argentina on a national level, which is what explains how microfinance works. In 2006, a law was enacted, law about microcredit, and it created a fund to promote social economy. From that moment on, through an organization that was created for that purpose, the National Microcredit Commission started working to promote microcredit and provide funding to individuals or cooperatives of social economy. What this law created as well were mechanisms to strengthen and train credit institutions. This public policy has been in place for 15 years, and it has enabled access to funding as a right for those who, through conventional banks, do not have access to financial services. In 2015, after 9 years of the law's implementation and before the beginning of Mauricio Macri's government, millions of dollars had been given through to 1,700 institutions, organizations who received microcredits and then loaned them again, and it led to a virtuous cycle. What I want to say is that when we look at the way those credits were granted, With a clear public policy like the national law, accessibility improves, and it is based on three methodologies that institutions and microcredit organizations use. One is individual microcredit, group with social guarantee, and community bank, and that's the one that I want to focus on. Community banks, based on annual reports of the Argentinian network, is the least used of the three instruments, but it's still a mechanism that was born at a grassroots level with specific organizations, and the members, who are mostly women, save money and then lend it out as credit to other women and their local communities, so friends, family. That way, they create trust and learning mechanisms that allows them to see who to learn, who to lend money to, and at what interest rate. They have generated loan mechanisms that can help improve the quality of life, for instance, cover problems with healthcare, education, etc. And that also allows them to create different guarantees when, in the case the money cannot be paid back. An experience working with an organization with this methodology in Buenos Aires, we saw that the local government gave very little support, maybe lending a physical space to carry out training or a little bit of money for some specific activities. I worked with two community banks in their process, and I acted as a facilitator as they became self-sufficient. And other banks that started a new stage with the national government when it began the administration in 2015 to improve the social and economic conditions that had an impact on these women who are self-employed. These groups were successful after the crisis and the pandemic, and they created their own strategy as an alternative for their communities to overcome challenges, knowing that banks are not the only way, for especially for communities that don't have access to banks. With a national policy of access to funding in social and solidarity economy, community banks that exist beyond microcredit institutions, despite the difficulties faced by members who come from very difficult life contexts, are an opportunity for local governments. They can support by co-creating instruments that consider the particularities of territories and their economic realities. From the perspective of social and solidarity economy, this mechanism offers something that the other two don't, which makes them sustainable in the community, and that is that finance is a right for them. Local governments can make those processes accepted or authorized, and organizations that are on the grassroots level can help to co-create public policies in a sustainable way that doesn't really depend only on the current members. And I think I run out of time, so I'm going to leave it at that, and maybe I can go on during the second round. Thank you so much. That's wonderful, Ana Bella. Milder, over to you, your experience from Quebec. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you. I participated many times with GCEF, so I think this is a different way of participating because I come to you remotely from Quebec. I'm here to talk about an organization called Cap Finance. If I translate it to Spanish, it is maybe a path to financing. I'm general director of an impact fund in Quebec that works in two different areas: direct investment to develop social economy businesses or financial inclusion businesses with the backdrop of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. That's the first area in which we work. The second is training and fund structuring, whether it's equity or credit for different populations or economic sectors that have little to no access to finance. So that's the organization that I had, Filaction, which is a member of CapFinance. CapFinance is made up of 9 organizations, and I will come back to that to say something about the 9 organizations. But before that, I want to explain what will come later. Quebec is about 5 times the size of France. It's an immense territory, but we only have 8 million inhabitants in such a large territory. Another important aspect is that it's a French speaking territory in the middle of an English speaking geography. Canada, the United States are English speaking. So, historically and culturally, Quebec has always worked in partnership, in collaboration, in a very practical way rather than following theory. Let me go back to the 9 organizations that are members of CapFinance. We have the Solidarity Economy Bank, which is Savings Bank, which is exclusively for social and solidarity organizations. We have Fiducie du Chantier d'Économie Sociale, which is civil society organization that manages funds exclusively for a social economy, Filaction, which I already mentioned. We have Microentreprendre, which focuses on financial inclusion, more specifically microcredits in Quebec, business-related microcredit. And there are 2 funds, workers' funds. The first is Le Fonds Solidarité, which is a workers' fund. So it's the workers themselves that contribute to the fund. They have over $13 billion. And the second workers' fund, which was also created by a trade union, it has $3 billion and it works exclusively on sustainable development. Having 2 organizations in that area with really great investment capacity is quite impressive. So that's how CapFinance works together. So partnering and collaborating in a practical way and not theoretical way, as I said before, means I want to share 3 or 4 examples. One, we have, for instance, worked in the last few months with the federal government with one single voice. The government wanted to implement projects in Quebec, and we said, okay, let's approach them to tell them what we in Quebec need. Second of all, together, we have worked to create an analysis guide for projects in social economy, and that's based on the experience of the 9 organizations. And finally, last year, the Quebec government organized a consultation for the social economy plan for the next 5 years. And we also collaborated in that 9 free, autonomous, independent organizations that decide to collaborate. Even though we're partners, we sometimes compete, but it's a very healthy competition. And I'll come back with more information in the second round. Thank you. Thank you so much, Milder. It's very difficult to respect the time limits, but we're doing great. Let's go to Juanita next. Thank you. Good afternoon, Manuel Alfonso, and thank you for the introduction. I'd also like to thank the organizers for allowing me to be in this panel. It's a very distinguished panel. I think this is particularly interesting for those who seek to promote a more inclusive work. The Global Social Economy Forum 2021 has been very fruitful. In the short time we have, I'm going to try to answer the question, how does my initiative contribute to creating solidarity finance mechanisms? Well, first of all, I must say that the proposal I'm here to share has been the result of joint efforts. Leaders of social and solidarity economy organizations in Ecuador and Solidarity Finance institutions, researchers, and academics. We have all worked together to create a more inclusive financial ecosystem. We identified that despite the progress identified when it comes to methodologies for financial services, there are still obstacles for communities to have access to funds. Risk assessment is still done based on the economic capacity of individuals, regardless of their context. This shows the institutionalized individualism that has made invisible the capacity and collective action. It fails to understand the social economy, it fails to understand community and the work of cooperatives that can help cover the basic needs of very important sectors of the population. Therefore, the initiative that we are proposing seeks to strengthen the methodology to provide financial services on behalf of organizations of social and solidarity economy. The risk profile must consider, we believe, the category of social equity for social economy organizations. This is a resource that organizations have that has allowed them to create value. But valuing social capital is a very difficult task because it implies understanding the characteristics of how the group relates amongst them in at least three levels of interaction: in the context where the group acts, in the organization's profile, and in the internal relations between the members. This interrelation is what really shows you the quality of the social fabric of that collective. For those who make up the organization, social equity is part of their intangible patrimony. It's part of their identity because they promote alternatives to cover their needs. On the other hand, solidarity finance organizations must value the social equity of their members of social economy, and that's what will help their financial activity be more effective because values like solidarity, trust, cooperation, reciprocity that support these activities can really improve the economic analysis and provide sufficient data to face risks of making the wrong choice when it comes to offering a financial service. That's why we believe that the proposal to evaluate social equity and consider it when providing financial services will favor including solidarity economy and solidarity economy organizations in the local context. Thank you very much. Thank you, Juanita. A very clear and very brief contribution. Luis Sato, could you share the experience of Caja Sullana? Yes, thank you, and good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation to be here. I feel very lucky to be here in the panel talking about such an important topic. Caja Sullana is a microfinance institution based in northern Peru. Caja Sullana was founded in 1986. We currently have 77 offices all around Peru in the 14 regions of the country. This road has presented many challenges for us as we have developed, and we believe that thanks to our organizational culture, we've managed to gain a lot of experience. We believe that the goal we have as clients is to come closer to our clients, and we establish trusting relations with them. So trying to answer your question, and I'd like to share some initiatives. Solidarity Finance seeks to establish a social link between the financial institution and their clients. And those links, that relationship, I think, can be consolidated based on trust and empathy. I believe that we have been fostering empathy by getting to know our clients, by trying to work very closely with them, by offering them comprehensive consultancy. With this approach, we have identified a need that had not been met for our clients, which was improving water and sanitation services. We saw that our clients were growing, developing their business, but at the same time, they were not improving in terms of the quality of their lives at home. So this was a problem in the household. So when we identified that, we partnered with an NGO, WaterOrg, and we established a strategic partnership to create a product called Vive Mejor, or Live Better. The goal is to improve access to water and sanitation, which is the problem we identified in our country, and it seeks to improve the quality of life of our clients. The financial product itself is for our clients that we identify did not have access to water and sanitation. In some cases, we helped with the sewage system. In other cases, they didn't have waste water disposal mechanisms. So with this product that we created, we managed to cover a need for them through social finance. We've done financial inclusion. We have tried to develop a step-by-step process for our rural clients, and that has allowed us to have an impact. Regarding health, there has been an improvement. This was a project that began before the pandemic, and during the pandemic, families did not have problems of disease because their quality of life had been improved thanks to access to water. The social impact is because beneficiaries consider themselves to be safer now that they have access to water. So they have better hygiene, they are less prone to have accidents related to sanitation, and there's an economic impact for clients because clients had to pay for water in some cases, and now they have more access to services because they have running water at home. So that's the example I wanted to share with you, Manuel, and I want to wait for the next round also to be mindful of time. Thank you all. Thank you. You've all given us a very good perspective of what your initiatives offer. I want to sum up by saying that financial inclusion is made up of different components. On the one hand, there's access to services, but at the same time, quality services, sustainable services, so that they can then be used responsibly and appropriately by clients. Regarding access to financial services, this has been considered important. Rejection of clients has been mentioned many times by several of you. New methodologies to reject less clients, to evaluate them better and differently. So providing access, whether through financial institution with a social mandate, the importance of a social local context, a popular bank, or through relatively new mechanisms such as community banks that were mentioned in the case of Argentina, or through impact funds that are useful for specific social aspects and that can promote diversity. We are all well aware that accessibility is important. In fact, it's one of the indicators of SDG 8, decent work and economic growth. But many individuals and institutions forget that we have to go beyond accessibility. There are other important things to mention to guarantee that social inclusion can be a reality. And we're talking about the quality of certain services, the quality of consultancy in order to provide the services. Jordi also broaden the context a little bit, and he told us that not only financial aspects are important, but the action of an ethical popular bank can go beyond that. You can also focus on culture, many aspects of society. The idea is to appeal to society as a whole in many different ways. And another important thing to mention is research and publications. I think, Anabella, you mentioned that community banks in Argentina were born thanks to research. And also what Juanita mentioned, she talked about new approaches and methods to include more people by changing evaluation mechanisms. There are traditional ways of assessing risks, but maybe we could look at different methods to make decisions. That way, we can support the creation of more inclusive financial ecosystems in comparison to when we use traditional mechanisms. The last comment made by Luis Atto, and now innovative projects that can add value to beneficiaries, to clients. That's very important. It goes beyond the financial product. It's answering to the needs of our partners, of our clients. You mentioned an important case of health and sanitation. And I think we have some more things to address. Many of you had to cut yourselves short. So let's go to the second round directly. So here's a second opportunity to go deeper into your ideas. We have a slightly different approach with the second question, but I think it connects very well to what we were talking about before. So now we will discuss how to co-create a path towards a more inclusive and greener future. So in your opinion, what should be the strategies or actions that individuals, groups, governments, societies, and countries must take in order to build a more inclusive and better world? What are the key actions that should be promoted through ethical finance? Many have already been mentioned, but I wanted to ask this question again. And maybe what do you think about the role of the 2030 Agenda and SDGs in this context? We'll follow the same order to avoid confusion, so we'll begin with Jordi. Okay, well, there are many actions, I think, but we must start also with recognizing the progress because many years have gone by, perhaps even centuries, since we started working to transform the economy. And even though it's true that many things are not doing well, and of course we suffer the consequences of that, but I also think that a lot of progress has been made in the type of economy that we work with, and that's thanks to the effort of many people for many years. So I think it's important to mention that. Of course, we always talk about challenges, but I think it's also good to celebrate a win because a lot of work has been done in many places for many years. Right now, I see two things. First, the need for a cultural change. When we talk about finance, we have to think about mechanisms that can help us solve our problems. Workers that are behind the work that has been done and for many years have been looking for alternatives. They want to adapt and they want to contribute. But as we have seen, sometimes it is very difficult. Sometimes they cannot really promote what we need. For instance, the United Nations has promoted the principles of responsible banking, and the financial institutions here in Spain that have signed that pact, most of them are behind the weapons industry, for instance, or the action plan for sustainable finance in Europe. It's supported by many banks who are the main partners of the oil and gas and extractivist industries. So those are just some examples of some of the main problems that we see. So we need to continue trying to to make an impact and especially take a hold of those financial spaces where I think we can improve. We work very closely with the Barcelona City Hall. They support the projects that we promote in small municipalities like Arbusias, for instance. They are partners of our bank. They promote projects together with the bank, and I think it's very necessary to work with local governments, but of course, those who are democratic and who work well. The second important thing I think was already mentioned by Juanita. It's important to bear in mind that besides credit and access to credit, we have to build social equity, relational equity. Not everything can be solved through access to credit. We need people that support by taking on risk. And there are many people who want to take on risk. Here in Spain, there are many projects. And for instance, there are cooperative supermarkets, and sometimes they look for partners, and there's always someone who answers their call, and they can get the equity they need. Equity is a way to empower each other and to empower ourselves. So I also think credit is good, but at the same time, we need other instruments that can help, especially when taking on risks. Very good. Thank you very much, Jordi. Go ahead, Annabella. Well, based on what Jordi just said, and also regarding social capital, and specifically about the role of local governments, this is also an invitation that's being made in this panel. I think that what local governments have is a very specific power to act with synergy in the territory and to have a very close look at the economic cycles that already exist for production, selling, buying, and all of the other processes that can take place in the territories. Among local governments, there could also be an articulation between civil society organizations, social movements. I think that the synergy that can be produced is very interesting, and it can also promote capacity for mechanisms that already exist. For example, we already have communal banks here in my city, and all of these processes of co-creation can provide many more results. There are solidarity finance programs that are focused on supply, not only in microfinance institutions, but also from the government and the policy making. And there is an approach to sustainability It's very important to have a supply-focused mechanism right now. So there should be something more based on the construction. There are many research projects that have appeared over time about how life conditions have become worse, but at the same time, there are many initiatives from civil society that have tried to oppose this. In case of Argentina, for example, we can see that. And it's not only about organizing for a crisis, but it is important to have a state that provides support through all of this. So I think that for this question, in order to co-create paths for having solidarity finance, it's important to include non-financial aspects as well, like the creation of a solidarity collective. As Jordi was saying, there's a cultural change necessary. We must have political change in the community to promote transformation. These political changes need to go hand in hand with educational processes that can promote collaborative community circuits that could also contribute to the enhancement of quality of life through SSE. For this, citizenship training is very important, as well as responsible consumption, the protection of the environment, among many other things. So it's very important to have training and educational processes, not only for the management of funding initiatives, but also in key areas that go together with all of the transformation that this process requires. I think that these co-creation mechanisms can also contribute to SDG 8, which is decent work and sustainable economic development, and also the one for responsible consumption and responsible production. Not only these two, but more specifically, I think they are the most closely related. Okay, thank you very much. Go ahead, Builder.
Adelante con tus
Oh, el
conclusiones.
sonido,
Ahí
el
estás.
sonido estaba cortado, sí, gracias.
Oh, I had some interference in my audio for a second, but now I think it's all good. So before going to the more specific question, I would like to link this to what I was saying before, related to what Jordi and Anabella also said. If we talk about economic transformation or environmental transformation, even social changes, there are three areas in which we need to work. And at CAP Finance in Quebec, we are working in those three areas. On the one hand, we are creating capital. So funds usually come from savings, workers' savings. In Quebec, for example, it's a small population, but there are two workers' funds that have more than 15 billion in capital. This means that it is a great economic power. In the second area, we are very knowledgeable. It is funding for micro businesses or social economy businesses. Within the scope of CAP Finance, we have the funding ladder that we need to go through. So on the one hand, we have the workers, and on the other side, we can fund small scale projects for micro businesses up until projects that can be worth millions and millions of dollars, because within the group, there are organizations capable of that. These are two of the elements, so savings, investment, and then in the third area, well, as we know, sustainable development is very clear, but in many countries, local and regional development is also very important, because when we work with regional development and small territories, we are also focusing on the future and addressing the causes, not only the consequences. So this is the background. And just to address the specific questions about the actions that must be taken, once more, there are three areas to work on. The first one is innovation. I talked about capital flows, and innovation is about new types of projects. Even when we're considering the sustainable development goals, there are many projects that are slow to start because there's a lack of technical and financial support, despite counting with all of the organizations that I mentioned, because when there is innovation, there's also high risk. So local and regional governments or national governments can also get involved. So once we have innovation and technical supports, we can also focus on communication. We've been working for more than 100 years in this field, but for society in general, this is not very well known. The work that's done with social economy is not very well known, and even people who work for social economy do not know that. So one of the biggest elements that we need to work on is the communication about what we do, how we do it, and why. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mildred. Now I would like to give the floor to Juanita, who has been quoted many times so far. Thank you, Manuel Alfonso. In this panel, I believe we all agree, and Jordi has clearly stated that building a better, more inclusive world means working on cultural management as well. And we can do that from a financial perspective. We must. Intervening in educational processes is important. We need cultural and educational spaces to create a great conception of well-being and the greater good. So we must have an influence in the mindset and the nucleus for senses and meanings. So the economy cannot be separate from the promotion of life. It is only through that combination that we will be able to address inequality and environmental change that affects us so much. The prevalence of individual systems that sell social values, dehumanize relationships, and make everything utilitarian should be abandoned and should be fought against from a cultural perspective. That is why, when it comes to the key actions that we must implement to build a more inclusive world, I believe it is essential to work with organizations and solidarity finance institutions. It is important to use our skill to use the symbolic value of money and the financial systems in order to acknowledge the work that has been done in all territories in order to create sustainable, inclusive environments for social coexistence. I also agree with Luis Sato when he says that finance should strengthen the trust bond. So for us, the strategic actions would be to boost or strengthen social fabric built by collective action and to promote institutionalized representativeness, as Annabella was saying, for creating synergies in our territories. This is vital because all of these diverse coordination practices that are less known, as our colleague Milder was saying, the social and solidarity economy initiatives are not very well known, but in this sector, there are social and economic alternatives as well as political ones. It is possible to fight against the dominant structure in a system that imposes a very individualistic standard, which is always excluding large groups of people. So it needs to provide access. We need to provide access to financial resources to boost investment in these actions, but also to promote political transformative action and to be able to promote government participation in the institutions, to promote the inclusive local developments that we need in this world. Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias, Juanita.
Thank you, Juanita.
Luis, el escenario es tuyo.
Now we will give the floor to Luis. Well, the great advantage of being one of the last speakers is that most people already said everything that had to be said. And I agree with most of the people who spoke so far. There are interesting things, in my opinion, like communication. I think that there's precisely where we fail because at the internal and external level, the stakeholders, for example, at Caja Sullana, the owner is the municipality, Sullana, it's a state stakeholder. So in these initiatives, it is very important to point out what kind of work has been done. There are also workshops and a close relationship with everyone involved in development. There's the microinsurance area. In Peru last year, there was an initiative based on public-private dialogue where supervisors and insurance companies, as well as financial institutions, like the institutional channels participated in order to address the issue of focusing on the client's needs in the regulations as well. So regulators understood that it was necessary to make many things more flexible in order to show more empathy towards our customers, and so that our solidarity finance would be more effective. These are the things that I believe should be improved internally, externally, and communication, and we must continue to foster collaboration among supervisors, the state, and everyone involved. And the customer should always be a priority, the main area of focus to achieve our social solidarity economy benefits. Thank you. Thank you very much, Luis. I would like to thank everyone right now. And we are about to conclude our panel. In many of the panels, it is up to the moderator to try to close and put everything together, but this will not be the case for this panel, which is very comfortable to me. But in order to have some time for questions, which I have also received here on my phone, I would like to ask you to just very quickly, maybe in just 1 minute, so that all the speakers can give a final message or give their own conclusions. That would be very good. And then if you have identified maybe an approach that was presented here, something stood out to you, or maybe if one approach that was mentioned could also apply to yours, or if you would be willing to implement something new based on what you have learned today. So let's continue with one more round of conclusions. Jose Manuel, you can also provide a personal conclusion in 1 minute. Thank you. Thank you. Well, briefly, I think governments ultimately must provide public policies that will allow the stakeholders and the social sector of the economy to actually become promoters and facilitators so that we can reach the most vulnerable population. We also talked about organizations which are mostly nonprofit. And on the other hand, it's also important to, through the benefits of social work, we have heard from all of the people here today that we must promote inclusion in the care and conservation of the environment. Another important thing is that it is not only necessary to be conscious about the protection of the environment if there is no financial benefits or economic benefits. There are people in rural areas in Mexico who earn 200 pesos or less per day and to support themselves, and it is very difficult to convince them to take care of the environment or to take care of electricity if they cannot only pay for a power bill themselves. So it is very hard, and we must talk about subsidies. It's not about giving away money, but all of the stakeholders, governments, and civil society should do what's necessary in their own work. Thank you very much.
Jordi, un minutito
Okay,
rápido.
thank you. Go ahead, Jordi. Just 1 minute to the quick conclusion.
Jordi,
Sí, ¿no? Ahora sí.
adelante.
Jordi, yes, we can hear you now.
Bien, yo varias, bueno, conclusiones, ¿no? De alguna
Well, I
forma.
have many conclusions, but I am going to
Sirve mucho de conclusión, ¿no? De 4 proyectos que hemos
tell you about 4 projects. I'm not going to explain them because we don't have time, but just look at what everything that we have done. Mensacas, for example, is a distribution cooperative. And the website, we have our friends, our cooperative friends, and they're all here. The conventional alternative, Glovo, it is a very well-known distribution company, and we must talk about collaboration here. We have another slide here, but in fact, the other screen. When it comes to electricity, as you can see here, there is Endesa. Endesa is also about collaboration. They mentioned this on the website. However, for the project that we have, I'm not sure why I can't say it now, but La Corriente, the power distribution cooperative, and their website, this is the first thing that stands out. Their partnerships with many different entities. So collaboration is the most important part. For housing, there's also a cooperative, and what they present here all the time is also collaboration. For conventional websites, there is no collaboration mentioned. So this is what stands out, and this is what we want to point to. It's the idea of working as a joint system, and public administrations have a great role. We have seen very clear cases, the government of Madrid and the government of Valladolid. 2 governments changed political spectrum last few years. So the government changed, and we renewed contracts. We thought that some governments would not be able to understand or would not agree with these ideas, but sometimes there are state policies. You think that the opposition and the government would be together in this, but in the development of a new economy, we need to have a state policy, a policy that will unite, because the future will belong to us all. And SSE deeply is sort of the Troy horse, let's say. So it's going to change the models. Thank you very much for the examples. It is very clear. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Annabella. I would like to talk about communication once again. Communication for the social economy. Over the last few days at GCEF, a lot has been said about how necessary it is to make SSE visible. And this is an idea that needs to be further explored because of what I was saying in the previous round. So it is about communication and visibility. This type of economy needs to be visible. There is a political entity, and from that point, we can create cultural changes and think about a new logic. The communication needs to be different in this case. I think it is key to think about the concept of communication from the origin of the world. So communion, making it common, communication. So this is all about co-construction. And this is the outlook that policymakers need to have. SSE is complex, diverse, heterogeneous. It has several different scales, sizes, and access to funding should be a right, not a benefit. And since we are talking about communication and words also build mindsets, we should stop calling those who have access to these mechanisms beneficiaries, but rather holders of rights. So we must think about this level of complexity. It's not about making initiatives visible. Not only that, but also going back and talking about cultural change, education, having political movements that will allow this. Thank you very much, Annabella. Now we will have Milder. Go ahead in 1 minute. Yes, without being repetitive, of course, communication is very important. And in some countries, it is also said that social economy accounts for 8 to 10%, sometimes a little bit more. In Quebec, it's between 8 and 10% of the GDP. I think that a way to be more well-known, more popular, more acknowledged at the political level is related to what Jordi was mentioning. How do we work as a community? How do we work as a collective? And how do we work with the ecosystem? And 10% is much more than an increase by 1% over time. Okay, thank you very much, Milder. Juanita and Luis, go ahead, Juanita. Thank you. Well, I believe that it is essential to boost association, community work, strengthening capacities and bargaining rights of the population, creating synergies, work with the local stakeholders and institutions in order to have a new social management that will have an intervention in the educational process to improve well-being and to promote life. Therefore, I believe it's necessary to have joint work among all of the stakeholders in society. Okay, cooperation once again. Thank you very much. Now go ahead, Luis. Well, I think that there is an interesting opportunity here. As a microfinance company, there are opportunities to put things into practice. There's a saver segment. People have their funds. These funds will be kept by us as intermediaries, but it is important to know who is using those funds. And it's important to let these people who are saving know what we are doing with their funds and who is benefiting from them. So in other business models, perhaps this is more direct, it's more visible. So maybe there is an opportunity here to improve that. Okay, thank you very much, Luis. Now we are going to take a look at the questions, and I actually have 2 questions related to financial education. Perhaps anyone who wants to take the question or who works in that field. What strategy could be applied to promote a better financial education at the local level? And one similar question is, the ethical banking model is adequate to promote financial education? Maybe these are very similar questions that can be answered together. Who would like to answer? I know some are working on financial education, alternatives, maybe Jordi or someone else. Well, we have some programs for financial education. And well, after the 2008 crisis, there were great takeaways and conclusions. Some of them have been more widely accepted than others. And one of them was that it was necessary to improve financial education among citizens. And the programs have been aimed to training people in complex financial instruments. So maybe explaining to them how to get into debt, for example. But when we talk about financial education, first we need to know why, what the main reason is, what's the purpose. And when these financial education programs were launched by the Bank of Europe and other countries at universities and at schools, all these concepts were explained, but of course the banks were not ready to do that. It was necessary to explain rather that there were other models and other ways to have a financial system. So we have to face all of those questions and we need to go to universities because sometimes they call us to give talks, to have a special day, but we really must go all the way to the root, visiting universities, business schools, high schools, secondary schools in general, where it is necessary to plant that seed and provide those important pieces of knowledge. Yes, it is this seed and this alternative vision that also exists and is worth communicating. We have another question that says, what is the role of the different social stakeholders for the transition to an ethical model based on well-being? So well-being, this concept of good living, perhaps is this more in line with what our guests from Ecuador have to say? Maybe Juanita, would you like to answer the question? Yes, thank you, Jordi. That's right. Well, in my country, the constitution acknowledges that social solidarity economy requires progress, but that there are also difficulties that come with it. I agree with Jordi when he says that positioning the sector means having an influence in educational processes. At schools and university, there is a structure based on formal economy where solidarity finance is in the edge. It's very not, it is not very widespread or disseminated, talked about, but association work is key. And all of these instruments and tools to understand solidarity finance criteria are not part of the educational system. This is the reason why, in order to improve all of our work, we must innovate in educational processes and to have a different concept of value. What is value? What is the aim of solidarity finance? Who must be benefited and who should lead the process? Okay, thank you. Are there any other ideas about this topic? Is there anyone else who would like to say something about this? Otherwise, we will have just one question, which is what should be the role of finance in the building of a fairer and more equitable world? I think it's a great final question. Whoever wants to answer can take the floor.
Arabella, quizás.
Arabella, would you like to answer the question? I think it's very related to everything that we have spoken about so far. When it comes to access in the first stage, it's very important to provide access to funding, mainly to those who do not have the opportunity to approach the conventional banking or formal banking systems through different technologies and solidarity banking tools. That should be our goal, to approach these groups. And at the local level and the national level, there should be instruments available to guarantee that access. There is also this second level From the solidarity finance perspective, cultural changes should be promoted to improve the synergy that we must have in the territories and at the local level. Why do you need solidarity finance? Who is it for, and what is it meant to promote? These are key questions that we must ask. I think the goal is very clear, and the previous question anticipated this. Well, good living or well-being is also a great ultimate goal to have. And the path towards it could be solidarity finance, which is a great challenge, but we are willing to face it. It's a nice challenge to have. Thank you. Thank you very much, Annabella. So now we would like to close just in time, as we promised the audience. And I think that if we consider the great challenges of our time, like climate change or migration movements, which will continue to take place in the following decades, we think about current challenges such as great inequality and also changes caused by digitalization that has just started the transformation of our society in a long-lasting and permanent way. Or if we think about the challenges that we are facing currently to truly have a sustainable economy, it becomes very clear that none of these great challenges will be able to be solved individually by one single country or one institution. That will not be possible. So in this context, I would like to highlight the importance of the 2030 Agenda and the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, because they focus on a joint vision for a better world, a fairer, more equitable world where there is equality of opportunity, more inclusion, and with harmony among humans and the environment. It is very important to have a clear vision of this for the mid and long term. Of course, there are still many things to be improved. For example, if we mention the indicators, one of the indicators was access to financial rights, and we know that we have not made enough progress on that yet. Some of it is not perfect and it could be improved, but I would also like to urge everyone to work together so that more concepts can be included to reflect a more precise vision for a more social and inclusive world. Beyond these imperfections, the agenda provides a good path for all of us to align our actions among institutions and people so that everyone has space and freedom to experiment and to share new approaches, to adapt them to the local reality. Today, all of our speakers have presented some of these initiatives and some of these alternative paths, as well as innovative approaches that complement, question, or even break paradigms in traditional systems. The main purpose is to achieve this vision for a better world. So, dear panelists, I sincerely thank you for your participation and for sharing your experience so kindly and willingly. Therefore, I would like to conclude this session and thank you all once again. Thank the panelists and the GCEF organizing team, all of the people behind the scenes of this event. GCEF 2021. Have a great day, afternoon, or evening. It is quite dark now where I am, and I hope you enjoy all the sessions that still remain. Thank you very much.
Cuitláhuac es un parque ecológico ubicado en la alcaldía Iztapalapa. Forma parte del programa integral Sembrando Parques, iniciativa del gobierno de la Ciudad de México, y tiene como objetivo la recuperación y transformación de espacios públicos para disminuir la marginación y desigualdad e inseguridad social, ya que antes era solo un tiradero de basura. El proyecto se llevó a cabo en 2 etapas, abarcando 82 de las 145 hectáreas mediante una inversión de 434.2 millones de pesos. En su primera etapa, Parque Cuitláhuac fue construido con un 75% de materiales reciclados. La optimización de procesos y tecnologías implementadas posibilitó que en la segunda etapa se utilizaran un 95% de los mismos. Los residuos de la construcción de las obras públicas han sido revalorizados y transformados para la construcción de la geocelda estabilizadora del suelo, andadores, caminos vehiculares y luminarias. En ambas etapas se forestó un total de 48.2 hectáreas, aplicando tecnología mexicana con aditivos de plantación, sustratos ecológicos para el mejoramiento edáfico y ecotecnias de almacenamiento de agua, generando un corredor biológico urbano propicio para introducir especies nativas del altiplano central mexicano. La primera etapa está conformada por acceso noreste y acceso noroeste, skate park profesional, área canina, plaza nodal, arboretum, área de juegos infantiles, pabellón hidrobotánico, humedal urbano. La segunda etapa está conformada por cartódromo internacional, rehabilitación de lagos, foro plaza multiusos, campo de béisbol, área recreativa familiar, módulo comercial y jardines polinizadores, plaza de acceso norte y caminos internos vehiculares, pump track, pabellón hidrobotánico. Dado el sentido sustentable y sostenible del funcionamiento del parque, se evita el consumo de agua de primer uso para el riego. El humedal propiciará el retorno de la biodiversidad lacustre a la cuenca del Valle de México. Parque Cuitláhuac se convierte en un parque hidroecológico con la construcción de estos humedales y sistemas hídricos. El parque busca la adecuada gestión del agua, siendo este un recurso indispensable para la humanidad.
Muy buenas tardes, tengan todos ustedes. Los vamos a deleitar con nuestra música 100% veracruzana del grupo Los Reyes de Veracruz de la Secretaría de Cultura. Vámonos a disfrutar un ratito con la música en vivo y esto que dice así, El Colás. ¡Óyelo! Yo vengo de La Habana del puerto de San Blas, conocí una hermana que tiene Nicolás. Y vengo de La Habana del puerto de Japón, conocí una hermana que tiene Don Simón. Colas y Nicolás, mucho que te quiero y el mapa que me das. Quieres si puedes, si no ya lo verás. Qué bonito vale la boca de Nicolás. Marcelina, mujer de Casimiro, quería que yo comiera los tamales de cochino. Mala Marcelina, mujer de Don Simón, quería que yo comiera un tamal con chicharrón. Colas ay, ay, compadre.
Que te quiero y mamá verás. Quieres si puedes y me lo verás. Qué bonito ve la mujer de Nicolás. Ay.
Saludos para Irma, para el Jan Emiliano y el jefe Hugo. Sí, señor. Cuando yo tenía dinero me decían don Nicolás, ahora no tengo nada con las colas nomás. Cuando yo tenía dinero me decían don Nicolás, ahora no tengo nada con las colas nomás.
Colas y Nicolás, lo mucho que te quiero y mamá verás. Quieres si puedes y me lo verás. Qué bonito ve la mujer de Nicolás.
Qué buen caballo tiene mi amigo Nicolás, camina para adentro y camina para atrás. Ahí va la despedida porque ya no aguanto más. Chica va cantando los besitos de Nicolás. Si quieres, si puedes, si no ya lo verás. Qué bonito baila la mujer de Nicolás. Colas y Nicolás. Tienes una hermana, ¿por qué no me la das? Ya vas.
Le dimos un fuerte aplauso para esta hermosa música. Y bueno, pues esta es una pequeña probadita, nos van a deleitar con más canciones, no sin antes recordarles y comentarles que el día de mañana nuestras actividades, me permiten, los voy a acompañar. El día de mañana nuestras actividades...
El que se sube al escenario tiene que bailar, ¿eh?
Yo feliz de la vida. No venía preparada, pero ahorita improvisamos. El día de mañana nuestras actividades es muy importante. Empiezan a las 8 de la mañana. No a las 9 como los días anteriores. Nos vemos mañana 8 de la mañana. Recuerden seguir las transmisiones que durante la tarde se hacen a través de www.gisep2021.org. Y bueno, lista para bailar, los acompaño.
Sale.
Por favor, un fuerte aplauso para esta maravillosa trío.
A ver, necesitamos un nombre.
Ay, caray.
Necesitamos un nombre.
¿Quién se anima? ¿Quién se anima a subir a
ver,
bailar?
un nombre por ahí. Ah, carajo.
Me encanta, porque todo el mundo...
Y todos contestaron. Bueno, vamos a seguirles, vamos a tocarles una melodía muy bonita que se llama El Tilingo Lingo. Recuerden que este grupo tiene formado más de 65 años con el maestro Francisco Barcelata, que fue el que formó el grupo. Y ahorita pues éramos 12 elementos, pero ahí quedamos 2, nos faltan 10.
Okay.
Ahí se lo dejo de tarea a la jefa. Bueno, vamos a seguirles con un son que se llama El Tilingo Lingo.
Esto es entonces El Tilingo Lingo. Un fuerte aplauso, por favor, para este maravilloso trío. Sigan esta transmisión en directo.
Ay, qué bonito es bailar el son del tilingo lingo, que no puedes zapatear los jarochos y los gringos.
Ay, qué bonito es bailar y el son del tilingo lingo, que lo puedes zapatear viernes, sábado y domingo.
Ay, repica, pica, pica, repica, repiqueteaba. Qué bonita y qué bonita, pero cuando ella bailaba,
Ay, tirín, 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 ay, dolón, dolón, dolón. Qué bonitas las hijas de los Simón.
ay, ay, nomás, compadre. El son del tilingo lingo tiene un ritmo improvisado que se baila los domingos en el puerto de Alvarado.
Y el son del tilingo lingo tiene un ritmo improvisado que se baila los domingos y en el puerto de Alvarado.
Ay, repica, pica, pica, repica, repiqueteaba. Qué bonita y qué bonita, pero cuando ella bailaba,
Ay, tirín, 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 ay, dolón, dolón, dolón. Qué bonitas las hijas de Don Simón.
ay, abajo,
Va la buena, compadre.
domingos en el puerto de Alvarado.
El son del tiringolingo tiene un ritmo improvisado que se baila los domingos y en el puerto de Alvarado.
Ay, repica, pica, pica, repica, repiqueteaba, qué bonita y qué bonita, pero cuando ella bailaba,
ay, tilín, 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 ay, dolón, 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 qué bonitas las hijas de Don Simón.
Se baila los domingos en el puerto de Alvarado.
Y el son del tilingolingo tiene un ritmo improvisado que se baila los domingos y en el puerto de Alvarado.
Ay, repica, pica, pica, repica, repiqueteaba, qué bonita y qué bonita, pero cuando ella bailaba,
ay, tilín, 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 ay, dolón, 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 qué bonitas las hijas de Don Simón, Simón.
Ahí nomás. No se preocupen, como están filmando, no se preocupen. La verdad nos sentimos como cuando están agarrando a Luis Miguel, que todos los sacan fotografías. Así nos sentimos ahorita nosotros, muchas cámaras. Muchas gracias a los técnicos, a los señores del audio. La verdad, muy bonito audio. Nos da mucho gusto estar aquí con todos ustedes, participando. Como les decía yo, ya este grupo tiene bastante tiempo recorrido. Aquí están las canas que lo van diciendo todo. Un grupo que hemos recorrido parte de toda la República, parte de Estados Unidos, Canadá, Roma y Japón. Hemos estado en varios lugares. Gracias a Dios esperamos que en esta cuarta transformación empecemos a difundir nuestra música veracruzana a nivel internacional, como se debe de ser. Bueno, vamos a seguirles. Hace rato nos decían que si teníamos La Bruja. La Bruja es una canción muy tradicional, era una canción que le gustaba mucho a la señora, en paz descanse, la señora Frida Kahlo. Los compañeros anteriormente, los veteranos que estaban en el grupo, ellos le tocaban seguido a la jefa esta, Frida Kahlo, y a don Diego Rivera. Iban a tocarle allá a Coyoacán, y esta era la canción, el himno que le gustaba mucho a la señora. Ahí les va La Bruja, esperamos les guste. Te agarra la bruja, te lleva al cerrito, sonriendo le dice, ya vente gordito.
Ay, dígame, yo le diré cuántas criaturitas
se ha chupado usted.
Señora, ninguna lo sé, ando en pretensiones de chuparme a usted.
te chupaste, amigo. Ya te chupaste, amigo. Ahora sí, maldita bruja.
Ahora le vas a chupar a tu marido el ombligo. Luego que acabes con él, si quieres sigues conmigo ahí, mamá.
Te agarra la bruja, te lleva a su casa, te siente en su pierna y luego te abraza. Te agarra la bruja, te lleva al cerrito, sonriendo le dice, vente papacito.
Ay, dígame, dígame, yo le diré cuántas criaturitas se ha chupado usted. Señora, ninguna lo sé. Ando en pretensiones de chuparme a usted.
Ahí nomás. Esa se llamó La Bruja. Una canción muy bonita, muy tradicional. Y luego ya ve que ahorita con la película de Coco, se llama Coco, ¿verdad?
Sí.
Ya ve que ahí la tocaron La Bruja. Pero esta es La Bruja original. Yo no sé qué tanto se pueda hablar, porque tengo una canción muy bonita que se llama Alquerrec. No sé hasta qué punto se puede tocar esta canción. Porque, miren, les voy a decir una cosa. Quiero que me escuchen porque no voy a repetir mucho. ¿Sí me escuchan? Eso. Mire, tenemos 4 querreques. A ver ustedes cuál quieren. Tenemos el querreque, el querrico, el querruco y el que rasca. No los oigo. ¿Cuál quieren? ¿Lo quieren rojo o colorado? No los oigo. Verde. Ah, carajo. Es ecológico. Bueno, ahí les va el querreque y voy a disfrazarlo un poquito. Voy a echar algunos sones medios picositos, pero tranquilos. Que ya saben que esto es un folclore, es la música folclórica, es lo tradicional de Veracruz. ¿Para qué nos vamos a espantar? Tantas cosas que vemos. Va y dice, compadre. Para el que anda desvelado, para el que anda desvelado, qué buena la cervecita.
Yo prefiero un tequilita, qué bueno para el enchiado, que es bueno para el enchiado, que hasta los panzos se quita, que reque, que reque, que reque, que reque.
Y ahí va el primer versito, así medio picosón, A ver a quién le sucedió esto. Si tu mujer te regaña, ¿por qué tienes otra vieja? ¿Por qué tienes otra vieja? Si tu mujer te regaña, dile que deje esa maña, ya que de todo se queja. A lo mejor también te engaña y nomás se hace taruga.
Que reque, que reque, que reque, que reque.
¿Están tranquilos o quieren más fuertecitos? A ver, con la mano, me van a hacer la seña con la mano. Alcen el dedo los que quieran más picosito. Todos. Ajá. Ahí va otro bonito, a ver si lo escuchan bien. Yo sé que esto lo van a subir también ustedes a las redes. Una güera me llevó a un hotel compartido y me dijo al oído: toma lo que Dios te dio. Pero al quitarse el vestido,
¿Qué?
salió más hombre que yo.
Que reque, que reque, que reque, que reque.
Una gorda me pidió que le hiciera yo el trabajo y me dijo la gordita: muévete con un carajo. ¿Cómo me voy a mover si yo era el que estaba abajo?
Que reque, que reque, que reque, que reque.
Ahí nomás, de lo bueno poco. Acuérdense que es importante que ya nos olvidemos un poquito de la pandemia, no soltando el tapabocas, pero ya tenemos que estar más alegres, más contentos. Ya, primero Dios y la Virgen, esto ya está por salida, pero no hay que olvidar el tapabocas. Es bien importante porque por eso las autoridades mayores nos dicen: el tapabocas va a ser muy importante para todos nosotros. Y nosotros pues venimos a diletarles un ratito para sacarlos de esa situación que fue muy difícil para todos, y por eso tratamos de llevarles algo alegre, algo picaresco y también algo bonito. Ahora necesitamos una dama que quiera bailar, porque viene la bamba, ¿eh?
Ahí está la del fondo.
Ahí está la de rojo. A ver, venga usted para acá. Eso. El aplauso es el que va a mandar. Eso. Venga usted que no va a pasar nada. Acuérdense que de aquí a lo mejor sale usted famosa, ¿eh? Acuérdense que las redes son tan importantes ahorita que bailar por un sueño es importante. A lo mejor de aquí lo está viendo los que es Televisa, Canal 13. Venga usted para acá. Venga, eso. ¿O quiere usted bailar ahí, quitar los asientos ahí? Bueno, ahora va lo más importante también. La dama es lo más importante. El segundo contenido sería el caballero. A ver, un hombre. Un hombre, nomás, queremos uno. A ver, queremos un hombre. ¿Dónde está Emiliano? ¿Ya se fue? A ver, Emiliano, ven acá, por favor. Ahí viene, mírelo. Este hombre no falla, ¿eh? A ver, el aplauso bonito. Eso. Mire nomás, aquí.
Sale a bailar.
Aquí estamos, estamos un hombre, ya te dije. Y mire, acuérdense que esto es diversión. Queremos que pasen un rato agradable, porque esto es lo importante, que se diviertan. ¿Le toca esa banda? ¿Sale? A lo mejor de aquí te vas a otro puesto, yo digo, Va y dice, compadre, la bamba. Ay, ay, ay. Ay, ya va.
Para bailar la bamba,
¿Qué?
para bailar la bamba se necesita una poca de gracia y otra cosita, y arriba, y arriba, ay arriba, y arriba, y arriba iré. Yo no soy marinero, soy capitán, soy capitán, soy capitán.
A mi suegra le dicen,
¿Cómo?
a mi suegra le dicen la cucaracha porque todos los viernes llega borracha, y arriba, y arriba, ay arriba, y arriba, y arriba iré. Yo no soy marinero, por ti seré, por ti seré, por ti seré. Ay, ay, ay. Jálale, compadre.
Para subir al cielo, para subir al cielo se necesita una escalera grande.
La mujer que yo quiero es una grandota porque tiene las ancas de guajolota y arriba, allá arriba, allá arriba, allá arriba, allá arriba iré. Yo no soy marinero, por ti seré, por ti seré, por ti seré.
Yo a las morenas quiero,
¿Qué?
yo a las morenas quiero desde que supe que morena es la Virgen, que morena es la Virgen de Guadalupe, allá arriba, allá arriba, allá arriba, allá arriba, allá arriba iré. Yo no soy marinero, soy capitán, soy capitán, soy capitán.
Bamba, 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 bamba. Ay, amigo, le pido de corazón que se acabe la bamba y venga otro son. Allá arriba, allá arriba, allá arriba, allá arriba, allá arriba iré. Yo no soy marinero, por ti seré, por ti seré, por ti seré. ¡Bamba! ¡Eso! ¿Cuánto falta? Ya ves cómo se puede pasar un rato agradable, para que vean que no nomás es coordinar, también tenemos artistas entre los coordinadores. Por ahí tenemos una jefa también, pero no, ella está enfermita ahora, hoy la perdonamos. Muy bien, muchachas, esperamos que estén pasando un rato agradable. Le vamos a tocar algo instrumental para que vean que traemos un poquito de todo. Esto es una canción venezolana que se llama Moliendo Café. Ahí está tu café, caballero. Moliendo café. Ahí nomás. Gracias.